Welcome to this podcast episode in my podcast series around vertical development. In this week's episode, I will look into the second leadership stage, which is called the Achiever, the number 2 out of 5 leadership stages, where we last week covered the Expert stage, which is the first. Today will be the Achiever. Next week will be the Catalyst, then Co-Creator, and finally the Alchemist. Before I go into the description of the Achiever, I would just like you to pause for a moment and think about a manager or managers you have had in the past who really made a difference in your life. Someone who inspired you in a new way, someone who taught you something in leadership, or someone who just became a very, very good role model for you. Think about that person, and as I go through the Achiever stage, see if there is something in my description of the Achiever that fits with that manager, and try to identify what was it that really made a difference for you. So let's look at the Achiever. So looking at the Achiever, first it has to be mentioned that all the capacities that are described under the Expert is also forming part of the leadership repertoire of the Achiever. So what I will talk about today is the additional capacities that develops at this stage. So a very big difference between the Expert and the Achiever is their situational awareness. How well do they actually understand the context they are operating in? Where the Expert looked very much at the task, had a high focus on the task, improving the task, making it different, making it more efficient, and so on. At the Achiever stage, the capacity to zoom out, if you imagine a camera lens, you can zoom out and suddenly you see much more of the picture. And that enables them to become much more strategic in their approach compared to tactical, which is typically what characterizes the Expert in the leadership approach. This also means that the understanding of complexity widens a lot. So the understanding of stakeholders at the Achiever level expands, hugely helped by the ability to zoom out and see the larger context. So it includes understanding other function and other functions' needs, but it also expands to include market dynamics. What is happening in the market? What is influencing the company that you are working in? What do the competitors do? What impact do they have on you? What about authorities? Are there coming new regulations that will impact your organization and the product you're producing? So in many ways, that zoom out enables an Achiever to see the much wider picture and begin to connect all the different dots that are influencing the organization. It also means that at this stage, an Achiever leader really begins to understand what is required to deliver. So if you, for instance, operate at the Achiever stage, all the strategic initiatives that are needed to be implemented to deliver a final outcome for the organization is something that would be on your mind. You would begin to understand resources required, how much staffing should there be, what different factors need to be in place for you to actually deliver on the agenda for the organization. Another area where the Achiever really differentiates from the Expert is on the ability to look at the people. So that zoom out from the task to the wider organization also influences how they see people. So the Expert would typically look at the task that the employee was working on, where the Achiever begins to see the full person. They begin to see the person for who they are, for the challenges they have. Hence, they also begin to approach them differently in their leadership style. So they can be directive still, like the Expert, but they also begin to coach. They begin to see the full person, what that person is and what development need that person have. On top of that, it expands to the team. So they begin to see their team as a very important factor in delivering results for the organization. Because if the team doesn't work well together, then they won't deliver great results. That doesn't limit to team within their own function. It can also be the teamwork that their function has to do with other functions. So in general, they facilitate a very different type of dynamics between people in the organization and also between their own staff and other people's staff. As part of developing their teams, they also dare to delegate and empower, something that the expert doesn't feel very comfortable with. And by doing that, they begin to grow their employees, because by being empowered to take own decisions and delegating some responsibility within different areas and tasks, the employee begins to grow because the responsibility makes them feel more committed to delivering, and it also changes the way they approach their work-related tasks. Another area that really changes is the self-reflection. So as the self-reflection deepens, you begin to reflect more upon yourself, you begin to understand yourself better. It also means that you begin to understand other people better, because typically you only understand other people to the level you understand yourself. So if you have a very high level understanding of who you are as a human being, you would have a tendency to also categorize other people as being very black, white, or whatever. For instance, when you begin to understand all the layers you have in yourself, all the beliefs and values that have formed you, you will also understand that other people's will have similar. And that makes you understand that people are different and people will be biased. It also means that you, at a high level, can put yourself in other people's shoes, because you can imagine how it must be to be that person in that particular situation. So you can sense those feelings of, for instance, oh, that must not be fun because they are really struggling now, or how great it must be because they're really successful, and so on. So you can put yourself in other people's shoes. With this expanded time dimension, you also begin to have the capacity to connect the dots between different time. So you may have learned something in the past at university or business school or wherever you have taken an education, and you can use that knowledge in a present situation. You can then add new knowledge and other input from other people, and based on that, seek to find a solution that would be fit for the challenge you're standing in front. So that ability to draw on past, use the present, and also see where we're going in the future and include that as part of the decision making is a very different change, or a big change, compared to where the expert typically operates from. At this leadership stage, you typically also begin to develop the ability to create visions. When I talk about visions now, it's like 3 to 5 year ahead visions. So it's not necessarily the far-reaching visions and the very, very compelling visions, but it's vision that can help an organization move in a certain direction. And the ability to think in past, present, and future hugely impact that. Where have the organization been? What have they gone through? Where are we operating now? And where do we want to be in the future? At this stage, you also typically begin to have the capacity to hold opposing ideas. So someone may believe something, and another one believes a second thing, and you have a third thought. The ability to hold the ideas and not just shoot them down, as would be more typical at the expert level. I am right or you are right at that level. Here it becomes around understanding that there may be some substance here and there may be some substance here, and I also have some. So the solution field expands a lot, and you begin to think in compromises. You may then target in on a solution, and that solution will be based on valid input from other parties. But when you then lock into a solution, very often it can be difficult to revisit that decision, because now it has been evaluated, and in an achiever's mindset, it has been concluded that this is the right outcome. So if someone comes after and challenge it with very valid points, it can be difficult for an achiever to step back and say, okay, I hadn't thought about that, let's include that and maybe make a different decision. As you grow in leadership stages and reach the achiever level, your self-reflexive capacity has deepened. That also means that your self-awareness has expanded too. And that self-awareness helps you reflect on yourself, both in the present and in the past and in the future. So, for instance, if you look at the past, you may look back at things that you've done in the past, what it's done to you, and you will reflect upon it. You can feel it, sense it, and you can use it in the daily present situation to do something the same way or to do it differently if it wasn't something that was so good. Equally, you can, for instance, add a work-related challenge. You may have had a situation, assume it could have been a heated discussion at a meeting. You may then reflect afterwards, what role did I play in that? What did I bring to that discussion? What was my motivation for doing what I did? Where was I trying to make the decision go, and so forth. So you reflect upon yourself and you're aware of what you delivered yourself. You may also begin to reflect upon what could you have done differently. So as you grow as an achiever, you begin to be more reflective around own behaviors and own fault in different outcomes and how you could have tried out other routes to get a better outcome. And it also impacts your reflective and self-awareness around future. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Where do you want to be in 10 years' time? Something that the expert typically don't think a lot about. So expert leaders see themselves in their current role in 5 or 10 years, maybe at a slightly higher position, where the achiever may see themselves in a functional lead and want to be a director in 5 or 10 years' time, and dare to think and plan much more for the future than you typically see at the previous stages. With that deeper reflection capacity also comes the understanding that everyone are biased. So as you begin to understand all the layers of yourself, how your own background, value and beliefs impact you, you also begin to understand that everyone else will have it equally. So we are hugely impacted by our personality and the life we have lived so far. This differs a lot from the conformer stage, where it's the opposite. Everyone should think the same, be the same, act the same, have the same views and not fall out from that conformity. One limitation at this stage is, however, that the achiever is not always aware of how their own values and beliefs also color their own views, how they see things, how they evaluate things, and so forth. So despite they're aware of the biases, they're not always aware of how much those biases also influences their observation of what is happening live in their lives right now. Where the expert were very uncomfortable with getting negative feedback or constructive feedback to develop themselves, it's different for the achiever. The achiever have reached a level where they can absorb it. They don't necessarily beat themselves up and feel ashamed when they have failed leadership-wise. They may feel guilty if I've done something not to the extent they wanted to. So it's a different feeling, not so hard on themselves. They may seek input from managers and other people, very often if they can see the benefit in it from themselves. So for instance, if they have realized that they have challenged with a certain work-related task, it can be making their team work better together. Why is it that they can't make their team work better together? Then they may seek input from more senior managers or managers who are good at that, because they can see the benefit in it. They can see that for them to make their team work better and then deliver better results is important for them, so they have a genuine interest in developing that skill. What really motivates an achiever is being part of delivering some outstanding results. That is what generates that well-being, that self-esteem, that personal satisfaction. So delivering results, being part of something bigger. That differs a lot from the expert, because the expert gets more motivated by the feeling of being very, very, very strong in a certain area, having other people's recognition for their expertise within a given field. Many leaders operate at the achiever stage. So if you take the expert and the achiever stage together, they probably constitute 80 to 85% of all leaders. In some organizations, there will be more achievers than in others. That comes back to what kind of organization are you working in. Is it a very learning-oriented organization that facilitates personal growth, who has a lot of managers operating at the higher stages? They will act like role models and drag up people in the development. And also different initiatives from a corporate can help people grow vertically. It has to be mentioned when I'm talking about these different stages, I'm talking about what really describes the most of a given leadership stage. But there are extremes, so there will be some achievers that are more assertive and some who will be more accommodative. So they will differentiate a little bit from the description I have given. So some will be more of something or less of something. So what I'm talking about is the vast majority of an achiever or the achiever population will act in the way I just described. Achievers is also the first leadership stage that holds a lot of the main ingredients which are needed if you want to hold more senior positions. So if you want to be a director or CEO, CFO, you need to have certain capacities to be successful. Capacities that are not strong at the expert level. And those capacities can be narrowed down to the ability to see past, present and future, i.e. the time dimension, your ability to zoom out and see the wider picture, your understanding of stakeholders that is much wider than just your function and potentially the neighboring functions, your ability to reflect upon yourself and understand that you are biased and other people are biased, and finally, your understanding of how the dynamic works in organizations. So there is a political influence that you need to work with to be successful. So you can almost see it like a political arena. If you do not work with your stakeholders, even the ones that you may not agree with, you may not be able to deliver the results you are seeking to deliver. I initially asked you to reflect upon leader. Now I've gone through a typical achiever leader. Did you recognize some traits and behaviors? Maybe you have some of them yourself. You may be operating at the achiever stage yourself. You may also have had a manager operating at this stage and recognize some of the behaviors that inspired you and motivated you in your leadership. The reason why I'm asking is for you to understand what is it that have helped you grow. Do you have those capacities yourself already, or is it something worth striving to develop? This was my description of the achiever stage. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any comments, feel free to leave it in the commentary field below. If you believe someone may benefit from seeing this podcast, do recommend it to them. And otherwise, I hope to see you in next week's episode where I will look into the catalyst leader. All the best. Bye-bye.